Before it was the Netherlands, it was the Spanish Netherlands, which sounds less fun and definitely was. This collection of 17 provinces was the economic jewel of the Habsburg Empire. Think of it as the one gifted child in a large, dysfunctional family who's expected to pay for everyone's bad decisions. Philip II of Spain, a man who combined religious fervor with the administrative passion of a micromanager, saw these lands as his personal ATM. He was fighting the Ottoman Empire, dealing with French drama, and building a palace the size of a small city. All of that costs money, lots of money, and the hard-working, increasingly Protestant merchants of Flanders and Holland were just the people to provide it. Philip, ruling from his desk in Madrid, had a simple philosophy. If it moves, tax it. If it prays differently, crush it. A foolproof plan for ensuring long-term loyalty, obviously. So, when the Dutch nobles politely suggested that maybe, just maybe, burning people for their religious beliefs and bleeding the economy dry was a bad look, Philip responded with characteristic subtlety. He sent in the Duke of Alba with 10,000 Spanish troops. Alba set up what the locals lovingly called the Council of Blood, which specialized in summary executions. It was a fantastic HR initiative. But the real masterstroke was the 10th penny tax. This was a 10% tax on all sales, not income, sales. In a society built entirely on trade, this was like demanding a 10% tax on breathing. It wasn't just punitive, it was economically suicidal. It managed to unite everyone, Catholics, Protestants, nobles, peasants, in the shared belief that the Spanish administration had the financial acumen of a particularly dim-witted goat. Revolution suddenly seemed like a reasonable alternative to filing tax returns. Enter the sea beggars, or Watergeusen. These weren't your noble Hollywood-style freedom fighters. They were state-sponsored pirates, essentially. Exiled nobles and assorted malcontents given letters of marque by the rebel leader William of Orange, which is a fancy way of saying, go steal stuff, but for our side. And they were shockingly good at it. They turned the complex waterways of the Low Countries into their personal hunting ground. Spanish ships carrying supplies, money, and soldiers would simply vanish into the coastal fog. The sea beggars didn't just disrupt supply lines, they were the supply line for the rebellion. Every captured ship was a double victory. Spain lost resources, and the Dutch rebels gained them. It was the 16th century equivalent of hacking your enemy's bank account and transferring the funds to your own. Simple, elegant, and deeply annoying for the Spanish. The city of Antwerp was the beating heart of Northern Europe's economy. It was a global hub for sugar, spices, and finance, so naturally it became a primary target for both sides. In 1576, the unpaid Spanish army decided to pay itself by sacking the city, in an event charmingly known as the Spanish Fury. For 3 days, they murdered and plundered their way through the wealthiest city in their own empire, an interesting approach to fiscal policy. After the Dutch eventually recaptured the area, they did something even more devastating. They didn't occupy Antwerp, they blockaded it. For decades, they choked off access to the sea, diverting all that trade and talent north to a little town called Amsterdam. Spain destroyed Antwerp's body in a fit of rage. The Dutch methodically and patiently suffocated its soul, redirecting its lifeblood to fuel their own growth. One was a massacre, the other was just good business. So how do you fund an 80-year war against the world's superpower? The Dutch solution was beautifully, breathtakingly cynical. They taxed trade. Specifically, they implemented systems of licenten and convoyen, which were fees for moving goods in and out of their ports. The truly genius part? They applied these taxes to everyone, including their own merchants who were sailing off to sell things to the Spanish. That's right, the Dutch Republic financed its war for independence from Spain by taking a cut of the profits from its own citizens selling timber, grain, and naval supplies directly to Spain. Spanish armies were marching on Dutch-grown food, and their fleets were repaired with Dutch-sold wood, and the Dutch government got a slice of every transaction. It's the ultimate expression of pragmatism. If your enemy is going to get supplies anyway, you might as well be the one selling them and using the profit to buy more cannons. Every so often, this long grind of economic warfare produced a moment of pure cinematic triumph. In 1628, Dutch Admiral Piet Hein achieved the ultimate goal of every pirate, privateer, and desperate monarch in Europe. He captured the Spanish treasure fleet. Not one ship, the whole thing, off the coast of Cuba with barely a fight. The fleet was carrying the year's profits from the American colonies back to Spain. We're talking gold, silver, indigo, cochineal, and astronomical amount of wealth. The value was so immense, around 11 million guilders, that it funded the entire Dutch army for 8 months and delivered a 50% dividend to shareholders of the Dutch West India Company. Meanwhile, Spain, which had been counting on that money to pay its own armies, promptly spiraled toward another bankruptcy. It was the most successful heist in history, and it was all perfectly legal, at least from the Dutch perspective. The Dutch didn't just innovate in piracy, they innovated in corporate structure. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, founded in 1602, wasn't just a business. It was a state within a state. It was the first multinational corporation, and it had the power to wage war, negotiate treaties, mint its own coins, and establish colonies. Its mission wasn't just to trade for spices, its mission was to violently dismantle the Portuguese and Spanish trade monopoly in Asia by any means necessary. While the Spanish king was managing an empire, the VOC was managing a portfolio. They sent warships disguised as merchant vessels and built fortresses across the globe. It was economic warfare on an industrial, globalized scale. They weren't just fighting for control of a few provinces in Europe, they were fighting for control of the entire world's supply chain. And they did it with the ruthless efficiency of a modern corporation trying to crush a competitor. The great irony of the 16th and 17th centuries is Spain. This was an empire that controlled the silver mines of Potos and Mexico. It had more precious metals flowing into it than any empire in history. And yet, the Spanish crown declared bankruptcy in 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596, 1607, 1627, and 1647. Being rich and being wealthy are two different things. Spain had cash, but it had no economic system. All that silver flowed right out to pay for foreign mercenaries and to service loans from German and Genoese bankers. The Dutch, by contrast, had few natural resources. What they had was a system, capital markets, credit, insurance, and a relentless focus on profitable trade. Every time the Dutch captured a silver shipment or disrupted a trade route, they weren't just stealing money, they were kicking one of the legs out from under Spain's incredibly fragile financial table. Spain was playing checkers, the Dutch were playing 3D economic chess. The 80 Years' War finally ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. The Dutch Republic was officially recognized as an independent nation. But they hadn't won through glorious, decisive battles in the traditional sense. There was no single Waterloo moment. They won by attrition. They won by making the war so colossally, frustratingly, and relentlessly expensive for Spain that the empire eventually had to cut its losses. The Dutch bled Spain dry, not with armies, but with interest rates, blockades, and corporate raiding. They built their own golden age on the foundation of a new kind of power, not the power of kings and land, but the power of capital and commerce. They demonstrated that a small, swampy republic could bring the world's greatest empire to its knees, not just by being brave, but by being better at business. A truly remarkable lesson in how to win a war by focusing on what really matters, the bottom line. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!